Yes.
Chairperson, this matter involves the Transnet stream and the acquisition of certain locomotives. In particular, Mr. Leher is scheduled to give evidence today, rebutting certain evidence given by Mr. Callard in relation to his involvement in the negotiations leading to the acquisition of certain locomotives. This further to you, Mr. Chairperson, having granted Mr. Leher's Rule 3.4 application. As you know, we seek a postponement of this matter until the October sitting in the weeks of 12 and 19 October. Essentially, the reasons are twofold, Chairperson. Firstly, after Mr. Callard completed his evidence, he has uncovered certain additional evidence, which he's put in a statement which we got last week. It might be that we want to lead that evidence for the Commission, and it might also be that that evidence implicates Mr. Leher. Secondly, Mr. Leher, over and above wishing to rebut evidence given against him by Mr. Callard, has provided us with a statement that also contains potentially important information relating to the negotiations and the relocation of the manufacturing plants. It's our intention to lead him in respect of certain of that evidence. So what we need to do is to complete the new statements of Mr. Callard, complete the new statement of Mr. Leher, and then our intention, with your leave, would be to acquire postponement now, and then for Mr. Leher to give evidence at once and not on a piecemeal basis.
No, that's fine. So I will postpone the hearing of Mr. Leher's evidence. Now, you mentioned October. Is that when other Transnet evidence is to be heard?
Yes, Chairperson.
And you'd like him to give evidence during the same week?
One of those weeks, and we will arrange that and sort it out, yes.
Okay, I think for now I'll just say to a date to be determined, and that will be done. So,
Thank you.
But if he can be accommodated during that week, there is no reason why it can't be there that week. So the hearing of Mr. Leher's evidence is postponed to a date to be determined.
Thank you. May I be excused, Mr.
You are
Chair?
excused.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are you ready?
We did, Chair. We're ready this morning. Good morning, Chair.
You haven't been in the hearing for a long time.
Indeed so, Chair.
You may have to place yourself on record.
Chair, I'm part of the SABC stream with Ms. Thandi Norman. Today's evidence, and it's Advocate Mpora Sibachere. Today's evidence relates to Mr. Rajesh Sundaram, who's the former editor of ANN7, and he was employed by Infinity Media to help set up, it's the establishment of ANN7. Mr. Rajesh Sundaram's evidence was heard on the 3rd and 4th of June 2019. Mr. Sundaram's evidence, it's an entirety, Chair, deals with particularly 3 matters which are relevant to the Commission's terms of reference, 1.6 and 1.9. The first being the sale of the archive content, second being the irregular and corrupt processing of visa applications, and the third, the involvement of the former president, Mr. Jacob Zuma, in the establishment of ANN7. Mr. Sundaram testified to 3 meetings that took place at the former president's official residence, which were attended by the former president, Mr. Sundaram himself, and some members of the Gupta family and some employees of ANN7. Mr. Sundaram was unambiguous in his description of the meeting rooms wherein the three meetings took place. 2 of the 3 witnesses today, Chair, will verify whether Mr. Sundaram's description of the meeting rooms, as described in Mr. Sundaram's book and affidavit. The 3rd witness this morning, Chair, will confirm Mr. Sundaram's evidence in that the former president disclosed his traveling arrangements during the 2nd meeting at the official residence. I have kindly asked the chairperson's registrar to place before the chair the relevant exhibits to Mr. Sundaram's evidence, which have already been admitted into evidence. The first being CC1, A and B, which contain Mr. Sundaram's main affidavit and supplementary affidavit, and Mr. Sundaram's book, indentured Behind the Scenes of Gupta TV, which is not marked clearly but has been admitted into evidence as CC1F. Then the following presentation filed before the chairperson, which I've also been informed in lines with the chairperson's new directive of pagination and labeling, has been labeled SABC Bundle 1, which contains Exhibit CC1G, which is Mr. Rajesh Sundaram's supplementary affidavits. The first being, Chair, is under the folder before the Chair is Supplementary Affidavit 1, which relates actually, Chair, to Mr. Sundaram's book, wherein he states that it is a true accord of his experiences while working as editor during the setting up of ANN7 in 2013. Also, that all quotations used in the book are not verbatim. However, they convey an accurate gist of what was spoken by the individual. And finally, that he commenced writing his book immediately upon his arrival in India in 2013. The second supplementary statement relates to his response to Mr. Hussein Williams, whose affidavit has been previously admitted into evidence as CC1E. Mr. Williams' affidavit was put before Mr. Sundaram during his testimony, and Mr. Sundaram has just reiterated his testimony in response to Mr. Hussein Williams in his supplementary affidavit. Mr. Williams has conveyed that he has no interest in testifying before the Commission or to cross-examine Mr. Sundaram. With the Chair's approval, may the supplementary affidavits of Mr. Sundaram under SABC Bundle 1 be admitted into evidence.
But when they admitted already, when he gave evidence?
No, Chair. These affidavits have not been admitted as yet. During the time of Mr. Sundaram's evidence on the 3rd and 4th, the Chair had indicated that Mr. Sundaram should, in affidavit form, supply that the words that were in quotes in the book, he must clearly state if they were in actual conversations and so forth. And also, the Chair had indicated that, it had given rather an opportunity for Mr. Sundaram to put in affidavit his response to Mr. Hussein Williams.
Well, it may not be your fault, but nobody has ever come back to me and said it's been done. Here are those supplementary affidavits. I'm hearing for the first time that such supplementary affidavits were made.
Chair, if I could just refer to the transcript of the hearing on the 4th of June 2019,
No, 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 you don't have to do that.
Yes, Chair.
If you say that's what I said, I accept that. I'm simply saying nobody has come back to me over the past 12 months or 14 months to say Mr. Sundaram has actually deposed to supplementary affidavits to address what you raised with him. And here are the supplementary affidavits. And I'm saying that might not be your fault, but I'm just surprised that I'm hearing for the first time that there are new affidavits from him. So where do I find, is it one or two supplementary affidavits?
Chair, it's two supplementary affidavits under, so there's a presentation.
What tab number?
Tab, it's G.
G.
G, Chair. And then under G, you will find.
But I don't have tabs that are in alphabets here. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, up to whatever.
Sorry, Chair, I was under the impression that my presentation file mirrors the Chair's presentation file. So from this, it should in fact read SABC Bundle 1, Exhibit CC1G on the front of the presentation file. I think, Chair, I think you have the incorrect file in front of you. It's just a small presentation file.
And why is it called SAPC bundle?
Chair, I was informed by the bundling team that
When it's about ANN7. Sundaram's evidence was largely about ANN7 and only, as I remember, marginally about the archives at the SAPC.
Yes, Chair. I think it would interrelate with the sale of the archive content from the SABC to ANN7.
So where do I find the supplementary affidavits of Sundaram in this pack?
Chair, you would find it under the file divider
and
G.
Please arrange for these to go into a lever arch file. You know, these files that are like this, they get lost.
Indeed so, Chair. I'll make sure that it is put in an archive file. Chair, you will find it under the file divider G, and the front page, it's Exhibit CC1G, and the first supplementary affidavit of Mr. Sundaram is under divider 1, which is labeled and tabbed on chairperson's file, and affidavit 2, which is tabbed as well.
I've read the first one. Then there is another one at page 3. Is that one of the new ones?
Chair. Yes, that's also one of the new ones, which relates to his response to Mr. Williams.
this affidavit too has never been given to me, so I don't know anything about it. I saw an affidavit yesterday of Mr. Williams. I assume it's the same Mr. Williams that Mr. Sundaram is talking about.
Yes, Chair. And Mr. Williams' affidavit was put to Mr. Sundaram, and he did, in fact, in response, in testimony, respond to Mr. Williams' affidavit.
Was there no need for him to be called?
Mr.
Williams.
Mr. Williams indicated, Chair, that he does not want to interested in testimony. He just wanted to put his affidavit forward, and he has no intention of cross-examining Mr. Sundaram.
Yeah, but what his interest is neither here nor there.
Yes, Chair.
Was there no need for the commission to get him to come and give evidence and be questioned?
Chair, in light of that, Chair, we could make arrangements according to also Chair's leave to have Mr. Williams come to the commission and testify. But he as I said, that even though his interest of coming or not coming is relevant to the commission, we could...
Yeah, but the legal team is supposed to have made their own determination of whether he should be called or should not be called. So my question is whether, is that what the legal team determined, that it was not necessary to call him?
Chair, Mr. Williams had indicated, he admitted to a meeting did in fact happening, but he denied 2 other meetings, but he did in fact admit to one of the meetings having taken place. And he also, despite him admitting that the meeting took place, he denied the reason of the meeting.
Yes, but did the legal team determine that it was not necessary to call him?
Chair, at the time, we had found that, it was not as necessary to call him at the time because he had admitted a meeting having taken place.
Yes, but he had denied some things, isn't it? Did he admit the content of the meetings as testified to by Mr. Sundaram?
He denied that the meetings were about policies in relation to the establishment of AN7, but he did not deny the fact that the meetings did in fact take place at the former president's official residence.
Yes, but if he denies what Mr. Sundaram says, we should have that side as well. We shouldn't have one side. We shouldn't have somebody, only the witness who says the meetings took place, this is what was discussed, unless everybody admits that that is what happened. If somebody denies, then we should hear that person.
True, Chair. Mr. Williams did in fact also receive a 3-3 notice in terms of Mr. Sundaram's affidavit. And Mr. Williams also elected to tell his part of the story in his affidavit, which has been admitted into evidence. So to that extent, we felt that, that is enough because he did receive the opportunity to tell his side of the story.
Yeah, no, that doesn't speak to what I'm talking about. If the legal team has to take a view whether a witness should be called or somebody should be called, obviously that's subject to me. But I have no recollection of anybody telling me that Mr. Williams denies certain things that have been testified to by Mr. Sundaram, but the proposal is that he should not be called.
I think if I could go...
So I think you must ask your leader to talk to me about it. But, we have, in regard to those meetings and the discussions, we have only one witness. If there is somebody else who has something to say, we should hear what that person has to say. Okay, let's get on with today's job. Let's let's start with the witnesses. Basically, the witnesses that are going to be called today are witnesses who are being called as a result of the Commission's investigation aimed at establishing certain aspects of, establishing the veracity of certain aspects of Mr. Sundaram's evidence about meetings that he said were held at the president's official residence between the former president, Mr. Jacob Zuma, and the Gupta family, which he said he attended. So the point of the evidence is to test, in effect, certain aspects of his evidence. Okay. Call your first witness.
Thank you, Chair.
You must just announce who the first
Chair,
witness is going to be.
The first witness is Mr. Mechwe. He was the former household manager at the former president's official residence. May the
You
witness...
may be seated for now, Mr. Mchunu.
Chair, Mr. Mechwe's affidavit.
Just spell the surname for the benefit of the transcribers.
It's M-E-K-G...
Give the full name.
It's
names.
Mr. Ramarumechwe.
Yes, give the spelling for the benefit of the transcribers.
Yes, Chair. First name is R-A-M-A-R-U. Surname Mechwe, M-E-K-G-W-E. And Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Mechwe's affidavit can be found in the same file as Mr. Sundaram's supplementary affidavits under the divider
We'll get
CH.
there. We'll get there after he has been sworn in.
Yes, Chair.
Do you want to tell me briefly what his evidence will relate to?
Chair, Mr. Mechwe's evidence will relate to verifying Mr. Sundaram's unambiguous descriptions of the meeting rooms, and also other submissions made by Mr. Sundaram in terms of the security when they arrived for the meetings at the official residence, Chair.
Yes, okay, all right. Please administer the oath of affirmation.
Please state your full names for the record.
Ramaru Mechwe.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
No objection.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes.
Do you swear that the evidence will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
You may be seated. So, Mr. Mechwe's evidence will focus on how, in his evidence, Mr. Sundaram described certain rooms at which he said meetings were held that he attended between the former president, Mr. Zuma, and the Guptas, to see whether his description of the rooms were correct. Is that right?
Indeed so, Chair.
And his evidence also, Mr. Mechwe's evidence will focus on on certain issues relating to security when those meetings took place at the official residence, and Mr. Mchunu will indicate what the situation was at the time. Is that right?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Thank you.
So it will be important as you lead Mr. Mchunu to, I think, first tell us what Mr. Sundaram said, and then Mr. Mchunu can indicate whether what Mr. Sundaram said correctly reflects what the position was at the relevant time, that is in 2013, at the official residence of the president.
Yes, Chair.
Okay?
Chair, with your leave, can I commence firstly with the identification of Mr. Moche's affidavit
I'm
to the
sorry.
witness?
Just repeat that.
With the Chair's leave, may I first commence with Mr. Moche identifying his affidavit?
Yeah. Well, we need to first admit, because you said these have not been admitted.
Yes, Chair.
Mr. Sundaram's two supplementary affidavits. The one appearing, this is SABC Bundle 01. I will admit Mr. Sundaram's first supplementary affidavit attested to on 22 January 2020 as exhibit. It will be what exhibit,
CC1G.
and the second one will be what?
It's, Chair, they are CC1G, and then they're numbered as Supplementary Affidavit 1 and Supplementary Affidavit 2. This is the... So they would be numbered, both of his affidavits, Chair, are numbered as Exhibit CC1G, and under the folders, I think they are numbered holistically, both of them, and then they're subdivided as Supplementary Affidavit 1 and Supplementary Affidavit 2.
Yeah, but it's not right. They can't both be G. They are two separate exhibits. And the first one will be exhibit CC1G. And the second one will be admitted and marked exhibit.
Sorry, Chair, would the Chair prefer them to, we just, shift down the numbers? So the first supplementary affidavit would be numbered CC1G, and the second supplementary affidavit be numbered CC1H. And then we would just have to change the subsequent affidavits of the witnesses.
We are going to make this one exhibit CC 1.1G. So you'll have to make correction. The one is CC1G, this one is CC 1.1G. And then your other exhibit numbers should remain the same.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, all right. So,
Thank you, Chair.
yes. Continue.
Chair, Mr. Mecho's affidavit is identified as Exhibit CC1H. With the Chair's leave, can this affidavit please be admitted into evidence?
Well, get the witness to first confirm it.
Yes, Chair. Mr. Mecho, if you would go just to the file in front of you.
You'll have to raise your voice.
Yes, Chair. Mr. Mecho, if you could just please go to the affidavit in front of you under the file divider H. And if you would go to page 1 of that document, it is, would you follow the sequence numbering that is in red, please, on your top right-hand side? Are you there, Mr. Mecho?
Yes, I'm there.
What is that document in front of you, Mr. Mecho?
My affidavit.
Yes.
SABC 0115 CC1H RM01.
Yes,
Mr. Mahwe, please raise your voice, and although she's asking you questions, look this in my direction when you answer.
Okay, Chair.
If you go to page 6, is that your signature at the bottom of that page? Page 6, I'm referring to the red numbers, but it is page 20. If you look at the black numbers, actually we should use the black numbers on the top left corner of each page. Are you there?
Correct, Chair.
Okay, the signature at the bottom of that page above the word deponent, is that your signature?
Correct, Chair.
Is this an affidavit that you deposed to on the 19th of August 2020 in Pretoria?
Correct, Chair.
Are the contents of the affidavit correct, true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, okay. Continue, Ms. Counsel.
thank you, Chair. Mr. Mechwe, could you please talk to us about your employment history? As indicated
Well,
in
maybe
your
let's
affidavit.
start here. Where are you employed at the moment?
I'm employed at the presidency,
What is the position you hold there?
household manager.
Household manager.
Yes.
At the official residence of the president, or at the presidency?
No, at the presidency.
Yes. Okay. How long have you held that position?
I was the household manager at the residence between 2012 and 2015.
Oh, that is at Matlabandlof.
Yes, Chair.
Yes. What are the duties of a household manager at Matlabandlof?
The responsibilities are to upkeep the household, the residence, to liaise between presidency and public works for maintenance, to also manage the staff based at the residence, to be the contact point between human resources within presidency and the houses, to make logistical arrangements for the household and the guests, to record the lost and found items at the residences, to develop and manage the leave cycle for the staff, to have a checklist for maintenance that's supposed to be carried out at the residences.
Actually, you set out your responsibilities as household manager at the official residence in paragraph 2 of your affidavit. It's
Yes,
a
Chair.
long list, paragraphs 2.1 up to 2.28. It's a very long list. It's a lot of responsibilities. Is that so? It's a lot of responsibilities that are attached to your position.
Yes, Chair.
Yes. Okay. So do you say you started in this position in 2012?
Yes, August 2012.
Yes. So in 2013, throughout that year, you were holding this position.
Yes, Chair.
Does this position give you, enable you to have good knowledge of the official residency, Matlabandlovu? So you know it quite well,
Yes, Chairperson.
the various rooms and so on.
Yes, Chairperson.
Yes. Council, take it from there.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mechwe, Mr. Sundaram described also in his book and in his affidavit the description of one of the meeting rooms. Chair, with your leave, if I could read a description from Mr. Sundaram's book.
Yes, just say where it is in the book, and
It's
if you
pa-
can, where it is in his affidavit.
Certainly, Chair.
And then you can read it, and then let Mr. Mehwe say whether, because Mr. Sundaram describes what he says he saw when he attended meetings at the official residence of the president in 2013.
Yes,
So
Chair.
Mr. Mehwe can say whether the descriptions that Mr. Sundaram gives in regard to certain rooms is true, is correct. So
Yes.
you may go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. In his book,
But
Chair.
I think, I'm sorry, so that you assist Mr. Mehwe, you might not need to read a long portion before he confirms. You may have to take it in manageable pieces.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
So just to identify where it can be found, Chair, in the book, it's page 98 and page 131. In his affidavit, Exhibit CC1B, it can be found on page 10 of Mr. Sundaram's affidavit.
Well, remember
Mr.
when you referred to his affidavit that he had signed he had deposed to two affidavits.
Yes, Chair.
And one of
Yes,
them
Chair.
was a supplementary affidavit.
Yes, Chair. So he had testified on these affidavits on the 3rd and 4th of June, and he had deposed to them on the 29th of April 2019. Mr. Mehwe, Mr. Sundaram describes the first meeting room on page 98 of his book, which has also been conveyed in his affidavit, that the room had a shelf with neat collection of leather-bound books. There was a television set mounted on the wall at the far end, a coffee table in the middle with couches around it, and ornate chairs in each corner. Can you verify Mr. Sundaram's description of the meeting room, as you've also indicated in your affidavit?
Well, before Mr. Mehwe does that, doesn't Mr. Sundaram indicate where that room is to be found as you enter the residence, so that Mr. Mehwe knows?
Oh, indeed so, Chair. That can be found on page 97.
Yeah. Tell Mr. Mehwe what room Mr. Sundaram talks about. If there is a description of whether it is the first room to the left as you enter, or the first room to your right, if there is such a description.
Yes, Chair. Mr. Sundaram describes it on page 97. He states that we were ushered into a well-appointed room to the extreme right of the entrance. And then the
Are you able to identify such a room?
Yes, Chair.
And can you verify the description of Mr. Sundaram's description of that particular room, which I just stated now?
Yes, Chair.
Yes.
So can you describe in relevance to your affidavit where Mr. Sundaram had mentioned the room had the leather-bound books and the television mounted and the ornate chairs and so forth. Could you just also describe the room to the chair?
Is that what he describes on page 18? I'm looking at the black numbers on the top left under paragraph 6.
Yeah, yes, Chair. That's from paragraph 5 on page 18 of his affidavit, Chair.
Does that relate to that room?
Yes, Chair.
Okay. Mr. Mehwe, you know which room we're talking about?
Yes, Chair.
Okay. Just talk to it. If you need to refresh your memory by looking at your affidavit, you may do so.
Thank you. There is this room at the residence with a neat collection of leather-bound books. At the center, there's a coffee table. There's two couches adjacent with a coffee table at the center. There's wingback chairs, about 4 of them around the coffee table, with a TV right at the far end of the room, not mounted to the wall, but in a cabinet. Yes.
Okay.
So, Mr. Mokwe, the only difference is that Mr. Sundaram had stated that the TV was mounted on the wall, but in your evidence, you were stating that the TV is actually in a cabinet.
Correct, Chair.
When you prepared the affidavit, or when it was prepared for you, had you been given the opportunity to look at Mr. Sundaram's book and see how he describes the various rooms before you confirmed or not?
Correct, Chair.
You
I did
did.
get a chance to take a look
Yes,
at it. Yes.
okay, all right. So in regard to this particular room, you confirm that what Mr. Sundaram said in describing the room and the furniture is correct, except that when it comes to the TV set, he said it was mounted on the wall, but that's not true. It was not mounted on the wall.
Yes,
If there's something else that you picked up that he said which is not true, you must just tell me.
this was 2013,
2013, yeah.
according to the book. So, as he explained it, it's the only thing that I will say. It's that the TV is not mounted to the wall. It was in a cabinet, and I also had a chance to check the room now.
Yes.
And it's not. It's completely not the same.
Yes, so some changes have happened since 2013.
Yes, sir.
But as at 2013, Mr. Sundaram's description is correct except for the TV.
Correct, Chair.
Okay, all right. Continue.
Thank you, Chair. Then Mr. Sundaram has also described a second meeting room at the residence, wherein they were moved to a second meeting room. Mr. Sundaram has described this on page 131 of his book, where he states that
Or maybe I said earlier on, maybe you could take it in pieces, but I think you can read the whole description because he has said that he did read the descriptions in the book and he's able to respond. So you can read the whole description.
Thank you, Chair. He states that we were moved to the next room. This was a much larger living room with various seating arrangements and a large TV set. We sat around a coffee table. Ashu took out the chip reader and the cables. There was not enough cable to connect the chip reader to the large TV mounted on one of the walls. So that is the description that they were taken to another room. There were various seating arrangements in that room, and it was a much larger size than the previous meeting room that they had initially went to. Can you confirm or verify Mr. Sundaram's submissions? You've also just highlighted that in your affidavit, the description of the furniture layout in the larger room from page 19, paragraphs 10 of your affidavit.
Chairperson, on the other meeting room, it's 2.5 times larger than the first room, and it does have multiple seating arrangements with coffee tables at the center, couches adjacent each other, and wingback chairs around the tables, and the TV at the far end. The difference from this room to the other room is the size. Hence, it has multiple seating arrangements. Yes.
And, sorry.
Yes, continue.
And the only difference from Mr. Sundaram's description and what you have testified to in your affidavit, what you have submitted in your affidavit, is that the TV, yet again, is not mounted on the wall, but it's in a TV cabinet.
In this specific room, it's not on a TV cabinet, it's on a wooden table.
Like a plasma unit.
Not necessarily a plasma unit, just a table where it's not mounted. I can confirm it's not mounted on the wall, but it's not within a wall cabinet. It's just on a table.
Thank you, Mr. Mokgwe. And then,
So in regard to this room too, your evidence is, except in regard to one aspect that is relating to the TV set, Mr. Sundaram's description of this room is correct. Is that right? Or if there are other differences, you must just tell me.
The difference from this
As
room,
in 2013, of course, we are more interested in what was the position in 2013, if you are able to tell us.
the difference will be the size and
Yeah.
multiple seating.
Yes. What did Mr. Sundaram say about multiple sitting?
sorry, Chair, also in his affidavit on page 26 of his supplementary affidavit, he had stated on paragraphs 28.9, in description to the second room, he states that there's a much larger living room that had various seating arrangements and a large TV set. And they sat
yes.
around a coffee table, and he had stated that there's a large TV mounted on one of the walls
Yes.
of that room. So that was his description.
With regard to the sitting arrangement, what did he say?
Chair, he doesn't necessarily identify what type of chairs. He just stated that there were various sitting arrangements in the room.
I'm trying to establish differences between, I'm trying to establish what you are able to confirm out of what he says and what you are not able to confirm, or where you are saying, no, that's not correct. So in regard to the TV, we have, he said it's mounted also on the wall in regard to this room.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, and that's not true according to Mr. Mchunu. It
Yes,
was
Chair.
not mounted in 2013.
Yes, Chair, it wasn't mounted.
Yes. You also mentioned the sitting, multiple
Seating arrangement.
Yes. Did he say anything about the sitting arrangement that you don't agree with or you are not sure? Mr. Mchunu?
No, nothing that I'm not agreeing with, Chairperson.
Oh, so it's just the TV, the question of whether the TV was mounted on the wall or not. You're saying that's not true. Otherwise, the rest, there is nothing that you don't agree with.
Correct, Chair.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you,
Continue.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mokgwe, Mr. Sundaram had also testified about security upon the arrival to the official residence where these meetings took place. He mentions it in page 97 of his book, where he states, there was no frisking, we were not asked to pass through metal detectors, and we were not required to give our names and details to any of the security personnel. We just walked in. He further states that I could not see any X-ray machines at the venue. I could not figure out if this was a special treatment for the Gupta delegation or if the security was generally of a low standard. You have highlighted this, Mr. Mokgwe, in paragraph 16, page 20 of your affidavit. Could you just comment on this?
There were no metal detectors or X-ray machines at the residence during the period in question, Chairperson.
So you would agree with Mr. Sundaram's submission, his description of the security in general, the metal detectors and so forth. So you would agree with what I've just read?
Correct.
Mr. Mokgwe also whilst in your tenure at the residence, did you see some of the Gupta family members at the official residence?
Correct, Chairperson.
As a household manager, how much access do you have to people who visit the official residence? In other words, are you able to see, to say most of the time who came, when, and so on to the residence? Or does your position not enable you to have access to that information?
Chairperson, at some instances, I do have access to visitors to the residence or guests, yes.
Would there be a record in the official residence of the president? Would there have been a record in 2013 at least of everyone who came to the residence? Or would there be no such record?
No record, Chairperson.
Yes, okay. Would you have been able in 2013 and in other years to know if certain people were regular visitors to the official residence of the president?
No, Chairperson.
You would not know.
No.
Does that mean that you would not be in a position to say how regularly the Guptas visited the official residence of the president?
I will not be in the position to say, Chair.
Yes. Would there be somebody within the official residence that you know would know that kind of information?
To be honest, there is no record or log in of.
Yeah.
It's treated merely as a residence, and guests will come and go.
Yes.
And there wouldn't have been any reason to have like a record.
A record, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but apart from the record, you know, if in your house your son or daughter has certain friends, if they frequent the house to visit their friend, your son or daughter, even though there is no record, you would get to know that, oh, so-and-so comes here very regularly because he's friends with my daughter or he's friends with my son. So that's what I'm looking for, whether there is somebody who might be able to say, although no records were kept, they know, for example, that the Gupta brothers used to visit regularly. Maybe there would be no week that passes by without some Gupta brother coming to the residence, or no month would pass without them coming. That kind of information.
Chairperson, there wouldn't be anyone that will, because not all the time we at work all the time, all of us. So,
Yes.
I doubt there will be someone that would have been on duty every day of the month.
Yes.
Chairperson.
Well, it doesn't have to be every day of the month, but if, for example, in a year, you might find that on some of the occasions when you are on duty, you are able to say, oh, for example, Mr. Ajay Gupta, oh, he comes almost once or twice every month. You know, he will come here. There's going to be no month when he didn't come in, and so on. That's what I'm talking about.
No, Chairperson.
You don't think anybody would know that?
Not to the best of my knowledge.
Yes. Okay, except maybe security at the gate.
I will say so, yes, yes,
Yeah,
Chairperson.
yeah. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That concludes
Mr. Machwe's evidence.
Mr. Mechwe's evidence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Machwe, for taking time to come and assist the commission. We
Thank you,
appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Chair.
You are now excused.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Chair, the next witness is Mr. Human. He is the incumbent household manager at the official residence. Now, he has, in his affidavit, laid down a very vivid description of the room in particular before it has been changed through the social distancing measures at the official residence. So his testimony will be based on the exact description of what exactly is in the room and what has changed since then. He will
Okay.
He will also testify in relation to the security measures that are in place at the official residence.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I think Ms. Human is ready to take the oath or affirmation. Let's do that so he can be seated.
Please state your full names for the record.
Jacques Andre Human,
Do you have any objections to taking the prescribed oath?
nothing.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes, I do.
Do you swear that the evidence will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you. You may be seated, Mr. Human.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Council, proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Human's affidavit is under, it just follows Mr. Moche's affidavit and is labeled as Exhibit CC1I. Mr. Human, if you could just turn to your folder. And the numbering to follow would be the black on the top left-hand side of your page, and that would start on page 24. Can you see that, Mr. Human?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair.
And can you identify that document, Mr. Human?
This is the affidavit that I have submitted, that's correct.
And if you turn over to page 30, is that your signature, Mr. Human?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
And you deposed to this affidavit on the 27th of July 2020, is that correct?
Yes, Chair.
Also just next to your signature on page...
I'm sorry, on the second,
27th.
that looks like second to me on page 30.
Can you just confirm that date, Mr.
Or is it
Human?
27?
It's 27, Mr. Chairperson, the police official
Oh,
didn't
okay.
properly.
Well, it's, yeah, okay, all right.
And just next to your signature, Mr. Human, you had stated you had written something down. Can you just read that out into the record?
Mr. Chair, I stated in the affidavit that please be advised that I, Jacques Human, was not the household manager at the residence during the alleged visit.
So that is during 2013.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And Mr. Human, are you satisfied with the contents of your affidavit?
Yes,
As
I
being
am,
true and
Chair.
correct?
That's correct.
You confirm the contents to be true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief, is that correct?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, all right. This affidavit will be admitted and marked as Exhibit CC1 Is it I?
Yes, Chair, aye.
CC1 I. Yes, continue.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Human, can you please just in a short summary tell us about your employment history to date currently?
Chair, I was appointed at the Office of the President in September 1995 as the Assistant Manager and Chef at the official residence, Mchunu and Glofo. I was working there until up to 1998. Then I was transferred to another official residence. I went back to Mchunu and Glofo in the year 2000 up to 2009. And from there again to another, deployed to another official residence. And then I started at Mchunu and Glofo again till current from 2018.
Yes, okay, thank you.
And Mr. Human, can you just shortly describe your role and function as the household manager at the official residence?
Also, as Mr. Mchunu mentioned, it's all those responsibilities. It is the day-to-day management and running of the official residence. Also, I'm managing the staff employed at the official residence. All the catering and housekeeping requirements, events management, maintenance, everything to do with the official residence.
Yes,
I'm responsible for.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Human. You've stated on page 25 of your affidavit, that would be the numbering on your top left-hand corner, also in conjunction with your descriptions from paragraphs 15 onwards on page 28 of the meeting rooms Mr. Sundaram has submitted in his book and so forth. He was sitting in the room while I read out the description as alleged by Mr. Sundaram. Could you just describe and also verify because you've actually, detailed it specifically, the furniture pieces and described the makeup of the room. Can you also just talk to the description of the room in detail?
And before he does that, I take it that the purpose of Mr. Human's evidence must be to show that when he returned to the official residence in 2018, to show whether he found the furniture or the descriptions that have been given by Mr. Sundaram to accord with what he found in 2018 or not.
Yes, Chair.
Yes. And Mr. Human, did you get an opportunity to, before you deposed to this affidavit, did you get a chance to read either Mr. Sundaram's book or his affidavits to see how he was describing the relevant rooms?
That is correct, Chair. When the officials came to visit the residence, they brought the book along and they read the specific paragraphs from the book to us while we were at that rooms.
Yes.
As well.
Yes. Now, Council will take you through the various descriptions, but are you able to say when you came back to Mahlambandlovu in 2018, are you able to say whether substantially, at least, the descriptions that Mr. Sundaram gave in his book of the relevant rooms was substantially correct?
That is correct, Chair. There were minor differences,
Yes.
changes made in the room, but overall the description according to the book is correct.
Correct.
It was still like that.
Yes.
When I returned back to the residence in 2018.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Chair. Would Chair indicate if I should reread Mr. Sundaram's description, because he has indicated that the book was read to him and he was present when Mr. Mchunu was giving his evidence as well.
I think what we can do, you can take him to, you referred him to page 28, is that right? Of the black 28.
That would be 25 and 28.
Okay, I think take him through each one, just for the sake of completeness.
Indeed, so, Chair. Mr. Human, Mr. Sundaram has said that upon their arrival, they were ushered into a well-appointed room to the extreme right of the entrance. And in that room, there was a shelf with a collection of leather-bound books. There was a television set mounted at the wall at the far end, and a coffee table in the middle with couches around it and ornate chairs in each corner. Now, you have described, I think, far more in detail the specific of the color of the couches and so forth from paragraphs 5 on page 25 of your affidavit. Can you talk to this? And can you confirm the contents and the differences from Mr. Sundaram's description?
And you can look at your affidavit to refresh your memory, okay?
Chair, the room as it's described is to the far left from the entrance.
Far right.
Far right from the
Yeah.
entrance. It is a well-appointed room. It is used for smaller type of meetings between the principal and a couple of guests. As you enter the room, on your right, on your left, there is quite a large antique book cabinet, and that is with the collection of the leather-bound books. That cabinet has been there since early 2000, when it was placed in that residence. The TV has always been in a cabinet. It's never been wall-mounted, and the cabinet has been there from the time that I started working in that residence, and even when I returned to the residence. So that cabinet has always been there with a TV inside it. The layout of the furniture is two-seater leather couches, brown leather couches, across opposite of a central coffee table. There's two wingback chairs closest to the entrance, and then there's other ornate chairs almost in front of the TV cabinet. Apart from the other details in that room, there's oil paintings on the walls, one large, two smaller ones. There is side tables with vases. There's a small fireplace in the corner that's not an actual fireplace anymore, but it used to be. And the difference from when I left the residence in 2009 to from when I came back was the curtains was changed. It was not the original curtains. And also some of the chairs, wingback chairs, was changed. But from the description in the book, it is, apart from the television set, everything is according to the description.
Thank you, Mr. Human. And then you described that that room that you describe in particular has since changed post social distancing measures. How is that room now?
Yeah.
It changed.
Mr. Chair, due to the social distancing and the requirements for the use of that room, we changed it into a conference facility area. So the seating arrangements, the couches, the wingback chairs, the coffee table, all the loose furniture that was in the middle area of the room was removed to accommodate a conference table with big screen televisions for the distance conferencing facility.
Thank you, Mr. Human. Mr. Sundaram has also mentioned a second meeting room, which you've also talked to in your affidavit. He, in his book on page 131, had stated that the second meeting room is a much larger living room that had various seating arrangements with a large TV set. Yet again, he states that this TV set was mounted on the wall. Could you verify or confirm this? You've also just in detail, as in the first room, described the larger room next door on page 29 of your affidavit. Can you talk to that?
The room that you're referring to is right adjacent to the former room that we discussed. It's what we call the formal lounge or drawing room. It is quite a large room with several seating arrangement. It's used for formal visits. The principal will meet other heads of state or important visitors in that area. It's a much larger space to accommodate more people. The room also, as I mentioned, have several seating arrangements. There is a television set in that room, but yet again, the television is not mounted on the wall. It's on a loose standing table in the corner with a television placed on top of that table. It's a light color furniture that's in there. It's quite an airy room with lots of windows, curtains, and wonderful artworks and so forth.
And Mr. Sundaram has also stated, Mr. Human, about the security measures taken at the official residence. I can see that you have indicated from paragraph 13, from the inception of when you started in 2018 again. I would just like to actually just track back to what Mr. Sundaram had stated, that there was no frisking at the gate, they were not asked to pass through any metal detectors, and they were not required to give any names and details to any of the security personnel. Further, he could not see any X-ray machines at the venue, and he could not figure out if it was special treatment for the Guptas, or was this just normalcy? You have talked to this on page 27 of your affidavit.
Mr. Chair, no, there is no metal detectors at the front entrances of the residence. Guests, when they arrive, they will be entering through 2 security gates where they must be confirmed whether they expect it. So it's not specific that each person will be stopped at the second gate for Mhlamba and Ndlovu, especially because if it's several cars or vehicles, and if it's a convoy, then they will have confirmation whether they can come in or not to the residence. But apart from that, security is responsible for the exit and entrances for all guests to the residence. The SAPS household is just there to confirm whether a guest can be allowed or not.
Mr. Human, just to say, you know, let's just say if there's several cars coming into the residence, are the identifications of the vehicles given beforehand, before the vehicles arrive and they're just waved in?
Mr. Chair, if that information is available in advance, it will be given to the SAPS for access. Otherwise, the vehicles will not be allowed through the gates.
Chair, just the relevance of that is Mr. Sundaram also in his book and his affidavit had stated that upon their arrival at the residence, they were just waved in, and his submission was that the description of the cars were given prior to their arrival to the residence, and hence that question. Chair, that concludes the statement, the evidence of Mr. Human.
Thank you very much, Mr. Human, for coming to assist the Commission.
Thank you.
We appreciate it very much. You are excused now.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, the next and final witness is Ms. Gillian Pillay. Ms. Gillian Pillay is a former journalist at the SABC, and her relevance in evidence is that the former president had disclosed his traveling arrangements to the Gupta delegation, and Ms. Pillay will indicate and confirm that in fact that the president did in fact travel to where he had said he was traveling to in the meeting, because he was traveling to an event.
Yes, so again, the evidence of this witness seeks to see whether at least some aspects of Mr. Sundaram's evidence could be true. Mr. Sundaram said that at one of the meetings he attended between the former president, Mr. Zuma, and the Guptas, the former president said he would be at Mpumalanga the following week, and this witness will tell me whether she is aware that whether Mr. Zuma was at Mpumalanga during that week. Yeah, okay. Please administer the oath of affirmation.
Please state your full names for the record.
My name is Gillian Pillay.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
I don't have.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
I do.
Do you swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you. You may be seated, Ms. Pillay. Yes, Counsel.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Pillay, could you just open up the presentation file in front of you? Can you go to the last folder?
You can switch on the mic as well, yeah. Okay.
Can you please just go to the last folder marked J? And Ms. Pillay, if you turn over that page, and the next page, you will see the numbering that we're going to use is on the top left-hand corner in black. That would be on, are you on page 33? Ms. Pillay, can you identify that document in front of you?
The document before me, Chair, is my affidavit.
Yes.
And the following, if you just could turn over the following page, is that your signature?
I confirm that this is my signature on page SABC-010-34.
And you deposed to, is that correct that you deposed to this affidavit on the 10th of August 2020?
That's correct, Chair.
And Ms. Pillay, you are satisfied that the contents of this affidavit is true and correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Chair, if you leave Ms. Pillay's affidavit be admitted into evidence.
The affidavit of Ms. Gillian Pillay will be admitted and marked Exhibit CC1J.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, sorry, I think I misheard Chair saying CC1A. Or J.
CC1J.
Yes, sorry,
Yeah.
Chair. Thank you, Chair. Ms. Pillay, could you just shortly describe to us your employment as from the SABC to current?
Maybe let's do it this way.
Yes, Chair.
Ms. Pillay, in 2013, where were you employed?
I was employed by the SABC, Chair.
Yes. How long had you been in SABC's employ at that time?
Up until the end of May this year, Chair, I was employed by the SABC for 17 years.
Okay, yes. In what position were you employed by the SABC?
At the time, over the period of 17 years, Chair, I was employed as a senior general news journalist in the Johannesburg newsroom at the SABC in Auckland Park.
Yes, okay. And you collected news for the SABC?
I did news day to day, anything from crime, gender-based violence, issues around, in those 17 years covering the national and local government elections, also reporting beyond the borders of the province of Gauteng, going to other provinces, Chair, to cover stories there, but also foreign trips as well.
Yes.
A lot of general news around health issues, particularly human interest stories, Chair. That was my forte at the
Yes.
SABC.
Would the news that you covered go on TV or radio or both?
In most instances, Chair, the news that I covered for the SABC as a general news journalist would go on to the primetime news bulletins, that being SABC 1, 2, and 3. It was translated into different languages. And also in recent years, it also went on to DSTV channel 404, the international channel that we are running on DSTV, Chair. Very few times radio would also utilize the stories that we would do as television journalists, and they would use those stories for their either radio bulletins or even digital news. Would also utilize our stories that we as television journalists would cover, and vice versa, Chair.
Would you cover areas such as the Mpumalanga province in your work?
Chair, the SABC has a mandate to cover national days, that being Women's Day, Heritage Day, all the national days that we observe as a country. And journalists within the different offices around the country, within the newsrooms at the SABC, would be given an opportunity to go to different provinces where these main events are being commemorated, where keynote address is being given by the sit-in president at the time. So every journalist would be given an opportunity to go and cover stories like that, relating to the 2013 incident, Chair. That is when I was, given the assignment to accompany a team from Johannesburg to Mpumalanga to cover that Women's Day event at the Thulamahashe Stadium in Mpumalanga, Chair.
You are talking about the date of the 9th of August 2013, which would have been Women's Day, is that right?
That's correct, Chair.
You say you were at Pushback Ridge in Mpumalanga on that day?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, what was happening? What event was there on that day?
The event on that day, Chair, was we were commemorating, as a country, we were commemorating Women's Day.
Yes.
The main event was happening in the province of Mpumalanga in Pushback Ridge at Thulamahashe Stadium.
Yes.
Where the sitting president at the time, former President Jacob Zuma, was delivering a keynote address at that main event,
Yes.
Chair.
So you were there, he was at that stadium and he delivered the keynote address.
I was given the assignment to be a roving reporter at that event, where I would do short interviews pre the speech with women, particularly in the stadium, women in farming, women in business. Also, what has now become an epidemic in the country, talking to women around gender-based violence issues, looking at the challenges women are facing and what they'd like to see come out of the president's speech. So that was the pre-speech reactions and interviews we were doing in the stadium before former President Jacob Zuma's address, Chair. We also did post-speech reactions following the president's address, getting a sense if the women who had attended that event, if what had come out of former President Jacob Zuma's speech was, encouraging, if it addressed issues of empowerment and equity, if they felt that, the speech had maybe fell short of their expectations as women at the cold face of the challenges that many of them face in provinces, rural provinces, like Mpumalanga, Chair.
Council, continue.
Thank you, Chair. Just off Ms. Pillay's testimony, Mr. Sundaram had described how the former president, Mr. Jacob Zuma, had disclosed in the meeting. That can be found in Mr. Sundaram's book, Chair, on page 119.
Yes, just read it.
where where it is quoted what the former president had stated, I will be in Mpumalanga next week, and I will meet people in the local communities and
I think
announce.
you should start a little earlier. Read what Mr. Sundaram says before he says what President Zuma said.
In the context of the book, Chair, he
Well, maybe
describes.
go to the affidavit.
Yes, Chair. Chair, that can be found in CC 1B of Mr. Sundaram's affidavit, where Mr. Sundaram had extracted contents from his book in the affidavit. It reads from in the context where paragraphs 25:11, it states, despite Atul's constant reminders that would only do what suits our vision, President Zuma's directives on editorial policy puzzled me. I will be in Mpumalanga next week, and I will meet people in the local communities and announce measures for their welfare. But I'm sure ENCA will not cover that.
I'm sorry, let me get to it. What paragraph of Mr. Sundaram's?
Paragraph 25:11. Because prior to that, they are talking about the publicity for the ANC and the channel.
Hang on 1 second.
Twenty-one.
Where is Sundaram's original affidavits? Where does he start discussing?
Chair, I
Is it
think
the second meeting?
this is the second meeting indeed, so Chair. In the context, it came from how other news stations, other media houses were not covering certain things. And he had disclosed that he would be meeting, he would be going to Mpumalanga the following week, and he had stated that ENCA, for instance, would have not covered that story. And then from then, the group delegation had suggested that they would send a reporter with the former president to report on this event in a positive light.
Okay. In paragraph 20 of his affidavit deposed to on the 29th April 2019, in paragraphs 20 up to 25.10, Mr. Sundaram discusses the second meeting between the former president, Mr. Jacob Zuma, and the Guptas, which he attended at the president's official residence. And in different parts. He says at paragraph 20, the second meeting happened in the month of July 2013. I do not remember the exact date, but I do remember it was a Sunday. The meeting took place at President Zuma's official residence in Pretoria, in the same room as the first meeting. And then in 23, he says President Zuma came to the meeting armed with the presentation we had given him in the last meeting and with some questions about its content. Paragraph 24, he says this meeting too was more of a shareholder review of the project. And then under paragraph 25, he, in various subparagraphs, refers to excerpts from his book from pages 117 to 122. In 25.2, Mr. Sundaram says, quoting what he says in his book, Atul told me before the meeting, reiterating a point his brother and he had made many times before, like the previous one. This meeting took place on a Sunday morning. Ashu Chawla came in his car to pick us up from the Midrand office. He was mostly silent during the ride to President Zuma's residence in Pretoria. And then in 25.5, he describes the security arrangement at the security gate of the president's residence. And in 25.6, the sitting arrangement. And then at 25.6 onwards, he says, the sitting arrangement was identical to that of the last meeting. And then he quotes Rajesh. Today, I will ask President Zuma to give us a broad overview on our editorial policy and also some suggestions on who we should hire as presenters. We will hear what he has to say, but we will only do what we think suits our vision. Ajay Gupta told me, that is Sundaram speaking. Then he says in paragraph 25.7, as long as it was just a formality and we were not bound by what he was saying, I was happy to play the game they were playing with the president. I nodded. The video logo montage or the channel ID for ANN7 had been made by a graphics designer in India and had reached us just a few days before the meeting. Then in 20, and then he says in paragraph 25.11, that is Sundaram, despite Atul's constant reminders that we would only do what suits our vision, President Zuma's directives on editorial policy puzzled me. And then he quotes, he's now quoting President Zuma, I will be in Mpumalanga next week, and I will meet people in the local communities and announce measures for their welfare. But I'm sure ENCA will not cover that. Their reporter will seek out opposition supporters and do a negative story on how the locals hate me and feel I've done nothing for them. Zuma said, Sir, we will have a reporter and camera operator attached to you at all times. That's the part that is relevant.
Yes, Chair.
Because what Mr. Sundaram says is that at that meeting, the second meeting, which he said happened at the end of July, President Zuma, according to Mr. Sundaram, announced that he was going to be in Mpumalanga the following week.
Yes,
and then Ms. Pillay says on the 9th of August 2013, which is the year we're talking about, she was assigned to cover the Women's Day function at Bushbuck Ridge in Mpumalanga. And Ms. Pillay, you confirmed that indeed President Zuma was in that function and he gave the keynote address.
I confirm, Chair.
Yes. And did you write an article or send to SABC the coverage, and was it shown on television?
Chair, with national days and the mandate that the public broadcaster has, over a period of 3 hours of any particular national day, we do rolling coverage
Yes.
of the run-up to the speech,
Yes.
post the speech, and
Yes.
we do put a pre-packaged story together for
Yes.
all primetime bulletins,
Yes.
which is a shorter version of,
Of the speech.
in this case, the Women's Day event, which
Yeah.
includes snippets, which we call bites of the President's keynote address speech,
Yes.
Chair. And
Yes.
in this particular case, it would be the same mold that the SABC would have followed. So there
Yes.
would be interviews prior to the speech, post the speech, as well as a condensed version of the day where the President would give his address for the prime time bulletins of television bulletins of the SABC, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, if the chair finds it prudent, our lead investigator, Dr. Pillay, has actually retracted that video from the SABC, and we do have it in our possession. So if the chair is interested in viewing the footage, we do have it at our disposal this morning.
Okay, no, we won't view it now, but what you can do is look at Mr. Sundaram's affidavit or evidence and see whether he does indicate, he does say that in that second meeting, the President mentioned some of the things he would deal with in Mpumalanga, and see whether those things were dealt with in his speech. So that's what you can check. I seem to remember that Sundaram says Mr. President Zuma said he would announce certain measures, blah, 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 blah. So that needs to be checked. And if they are there, then something needs to be placed on record. If they are not there, that something needs to be placed on record. So, but that can be done some other time.
Indeed, so Chair, I have viewed the video. It's around about a 2-minute clip. It's just verifying that the former president was indeed at the event in Mpumalanga, and there's a snippet of Ms. Pillay covering the event itself. So the contents of his speech as a whole, I have not seen, but we could also just get that as well.
You can ask for the full speech as well. Look at what Mr. Sundaram says President Zuma said at that meeting with the Guptas, if anything, about some of the issues he would address, and see whether they are in the speech or not.
We'll get to that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, all right. Ms. Pillay, thank you very much for coming to assist the Commission. We appreciate it very much. You are now excused.
Thank you, Chair. That then concludes the witnesses for this morning. I've also just looked at my watch, and I completely forgot to indicate to Chair about the tea, but
That's fine. We are going to adjourn for the day. The Commission will sit tomorrow to hear the evidence of Mr. Mutseki, the HOD for the Department of Human Settlements in the Free State. We adjourn.